Greetings, traveler. Typically in game design, when we start working on a new feature or a new weapon, we create a document for the game design, we give it a title, and we start writing away all the particular elements that make this element or new weapon in our game unique in terms of game design. Afterwards, we might stop to create some tests for our game design. But what if I said that doing it the other way around is way, way more beneficial? My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 13 years now, and back in the beginning of my career, I would always write game design documents the same way. Just start from the most general part, the title, then move on to some general description, then move on to write all the particular requirements and all the little details of that feature that would make it unique and identifiable in the game. Later on, I found out that if I can add some tests for game design, that would be very beneficial because then I would have some way to validate if what I created game design-wise was testable and it was behaving as I intended. And then I realized that, wait a minute, in programming, there is this concept of test-based development where instead of going and writing the content of the code, the content of each function first, and then testing it, instead, you write the tests first before writing any of the code for the function, and you use the tests to guide your way through the function and to make sure that the content of the function would return the values you expect. So, knowing that concept from programming, I wondered, what if we did the same thing in game design? What if we wrote the tests first and then used those to write all the details about the game design for a specific game element? So I want to show you a couple of concrete examples to show how it works generally in programming with pseudocode, and then I want to show you how it would work in a sample game design scenario. And then I'm going to talk about the benefits that I realized using this method. So let's jump right in. So in coding, typically you have a scenario like this. So you say you want to write a function that takes two variables, a and b, adds them, and returns their result. And typically here, most programmers would jump in and they would start writing the code, which is extremely short in this case, and then begin to test it. But in test-based programming, instead what you do is you write the test cases first before actually starting to write the content of the function. So it would look like something like this. You say that, and these are just a few for as a sample, it's not the exhaustive list. But you would say something like, my expectation for this function is to, when I give it, for example, 1 and 2 as its variables, the result is 3. And when I give it 0 and 0, the result is 0. And if I do something silly, something that's not covered by the use case and the functionality of this function, if I give it a string and I say, take high and 3 as your arguments, my expectation, my desire and my design for this function is to get an error, because I don't want this function to be able to add these two things because I consider them different. Now, this is generally what we do in coding, or some people like to take this approach in coding, and it's usually not discussed in the context of other disciplines. Certainly, I have never seen it in game design before. But if we wanted to apply the same way of thinking, the same mentality to game design, it would look like something like this. So let's say you have an action game, and in your action game there is multiple different weapons. There's swords and daggers and axes and all that stuff. And you want to add a scythe as a new weapon. So you want to add this scythe, and typically here you would go in the design document before it gets implemented into the game, before you do any tests, and you would say, okay, scythes have an attack speed and damage and abilities and looks and so on. So you would go through all these things, and eventually one day you would get to test the scythe to see if it feels good using it in the game and so on. But if we wanted to use this framework in game design instead, it would look like something like this. Before we start writing any of the details for the scythe, any whatsoever, we would create the tests. And the tests always come from this mentality. What do I want this new scythe weapon to be able to do in the game? When will I know that my implementation of this scythe is successful in terms of game design? So here are some sample test cases that I have created for this scenario. So one of these tests is that the scythe deals more damage than the sword. This is one of the tests that I want to be able to do in the game, and I want it to hold true if my design is correct. Another one is the scythe is slower than the axe. If the scythe is not slower than the axe, it means that something in my implementation, something in my scythe rules is off and it should be corrected for this particular example. And finally, I want the scythe to be more expensive than daggers. So this is another way for me to specify what I want to happen once the scythe is implemented in the game. And we do that before writing any of the scythe details in the game design document. And why would we want to do it this way? There's several benefits. One is that it focuses our mind in the outcome we expect, and it prevents us from getting lost in the weeds as much. If we start writing details about the scythe, we can say, this is the attack speed, and these are all the skills it has, and this is how cool it looks, and we can talk about all these things. But all this essentially comes from nowhere. It comes from from our desire to create something new, which is not bad, of course, but doing it this way focuses our thoughts and our direction specifically to achieve these tests that we have put down for ourselves here. And having these before the main content of the scythe weapon is written allows us to ask this question. With every detail we write about the scythe, we can say, does all these rules and all these details that we write about the scythe, do these conform with the tests that we have already decided beforehand? If yes, that's cool, we can keep going. If not, then we need to rethink the new rule or the new detail about the scythe that breaks our tests right from the design stage. So, and this uncovers another huge benefit. It lets you find errors in game design, so game design bugs, before they become code bugs or game bugs, or somebody has to test it in a level out there and find out the error for themselves. So not only we caught the problem super early in the process and we can correct it, but we also saved ourselves and the team tons of time, tons of money, super good result, always worth going for. And finally, another really cool thing about having tests like that is that we can communicate the purpose of this feature very easily, not just to other members in the game design team, but also to programmers and, of course, testers for the game as well. So it's different to say, please implement a scythe that can do A, B, C, and so on. And it's way, way different to say, please, when you implement this scythe with the details that I specified, also make sure that in your implementation, it deals more damage than the sword, it's slower than the axe, and so on. So that gives programmers an extra layer of safety when they're evaluating their own work before handing the result back to the game designer and the testers of the game. So it gives a programmer an opportunity to check their work and to shorten the time they need to deliver this finalized product for the game as quickly as possible. After they are done implementing the scythe, if they find that that implementation doesn't conform with the test cases for the game design, then they know that they either made a mistake in the implementation, and even though the scythe, for example, is supposed to be slower than the sword or the axe in this case, it isn't, then they already know that there's something wrong and they have to recheck their code. And if after rechecking their code they couldn't find any errors, then it must be the case that something in the game design stage must be wrong to lead to that situation that we don't want. So it acts as an additional safety net in both game design and programming and testing work, and it also has the potential to save us loads and loads and loads of time. So after I discovered this method, I've been using it for basically all of my game design, and I can't describe you how much time it has saved us and how much more easy the process of developing new features has become, especially when you have it super clear in your mind what the outcome of this new game design feature is supposed to be when it's all said and done. And knowing that right from the beginning, before you even start writing all the details in the game design document about it, is, in my experience, a huge boost and a huge kickstart in the process. So anyway, that's it for me for today. This is a feature that I don't know if other people are aware of out there. I know that test-based programming is already very rare as far as I've seen in the games industry. I think it's a shame. I think it should be used more because it's very promising, although I know it's a different work style and it's a different workflow than most people might be used to. And yeah, I really hope more game designers see the benefit of this method and perhaps start to experiment with it and see the results. If someone out there is already using it or is willing to use it and check out the results, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I'll be super interested to read and learn from you guys as well. So thank you again, Traveler, for watching. And as always, have fun.